Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Saints had the day off, but normally when the Saints are off, we cut Ross Jackson loose, but we decided to reel him in today anyway because the Saints played a preseason game on Saturday. They practiced Sunday, so I wanted to kind of recap a lot of that, and Ross is good enough to join us from the beach. Doesn't suck being in Irvine, California. How are you, man?
Hey, buddy. Doing great. I am indeed hanging out at Huntington Beach today, not to make anybody jealous, but, nice day out here.
It's 96 degrees at 5:03 p.m., Ross. We are all insanely jealous of you right now.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. Thanks for that. Anyway, hey, big takeaways from preseason game number 1 against Arizona.
Yeah, I think obviously one of the biggest things was always going to be sort of the excellent performance by rookie quarterback Spencer Rattler, right? I mean, he gets out there at the beginning of the second half, leads a touchdown drive, which he himself runs in from 4 yards out. Then he leads the big game-winning drive at the end, setting things up for rookie kicker Charlie Smith, who, by the way, never kicked a field goal in an American football game. And then the first time that he gets to kick a field goal, he's kicking a 37-yard game winner, and he drills it. I mean, pretty nice stuff, even after getting iced in that situation, too. Really cool stories to come out of there.
When I'm looking at my Twitter or my X, and that should not be the basis for every start of a conversation,
sure.
I would believe two things if I knew nothing about football. One, Spencer Rattler's going to the Hall of Fame, and two, the Saints' offensive line is absolutely horrific. What did you see that could we talked about Rattler. What about the offensive line?
Yeah, I think the offensive line was maybe one of my bigger concerns, particularly, and I don't think it's any mystery for anybody who watched that game, Trevor Penning. Fitting in over at right tackle, learning a new position, trying to get his technique right, things like that. Even a guy like Duke Manyweather, who has been a part of so many successful offensive line careers through his offensive line mastermind programs and things like that, took to Twitter, kind of talked about how he saw a guy that wasn't relying on his technique, kind of lost everything in those moments. It just wasn't a very good day for him. Outside of that, though, I thought that we learned that Lucas Patrick is very likely the team's starting left guard. He is their most aggressive, most physical offensive lineman. Taliese Falanga looked really good over at left tackle as well. And I think, you've already got your starters at center and right guard. So I think beyond that, I think the other concerns just kind of come through depth. So we'll see how those things improve throughout. But the biggest thing that everyone should be watching is Trevor Penning at that right tackle spot.
Do you think, and I want to get to Sunday's practice here in a second, but we all tend to, Ross, I think, focus so much on the obvious. Well, A.T. Perry caught a big 50-yard pass. Spencer Rattler led the game-winning drive. What were the things, the nuanced things that you noticed or that DA talked about when you all met yesterday that maybe that weren't obvious watching the game?
Yeah, for sure. Sticking with A.T. Perry, I think one of the things that endeared him to the coaching staff a bit more than the big 58-yard catch was his willingness as a blocker. It shows up on the tape big time. He was in there, getting ready or rather was ready to help contribute to the run game. I think that was a big thing. I think Rico Payton was another guy that really stood out, the undrafted free agent cornerback who struggled in practices, was targeted 6 times, only allowed 1 catch. I think that was a big guy that ended up maybe, setting himself up, maybe raising his stock a little bit in terms of where he was starting here over the course of training camp. And then I would just look at the offense. 9 snaps for the starting offense. Only 4 of them included any motion. All of that motion, all 4 of those plays were either Foster Moreau and Taysom Hill. So it was really basic stuff. No motion at the snap, which means that everybody was settled on their movement before the snap actually happened. So, I think they called it a vanilla offense. I would call it a milk-flavored offense. It was very, very plain. And that's not like an insult to the offense. It's just relative to, the caramel cashew cluster chunk offense that we've seen at training camp that's had so many goodies be a part of it. It was just a very plain look on the offense. So easy to get evaluations on guys that struggled in that circumstance. Tougher to find the nuances, but there was certainly some.
Makes sense. That's why he's one of the best. Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And LouisianaSports.net. He'll be leading our coverage for the New Orleans Saints. We're glad to have Ross on board, and we are looking for a launch of the site this week, so we'll keep you posted on that. Sunday, day after a game, I would imagine they just sort of take it easy the day after a game. What did they do out there on Sunday?
Yeah, it was a pretty light day, at least in the start. It did pick up energy-wise throughout. They worked a lot of situational stuff. So we saw some red zone work when it came to full team drills. And then we saw more work for end-of-game situations. And so that's where, like, kind of the energy picked up. It was a little bit different just because of the fact there were only two quarterbacks there. Derek Carr and Jake Haener were the ones that got those snaps. Spencer Rattler missed with a thigh contusion, but he's expected to be back at tomorrow's practice, so I wouldn't be too worried about that at all. But Jake Haener excelled again, leading another, game-winning touchdown drive in a simulation. He's done that before in training camp, followed it up again yesterday in Sunday's practice. I think that we saw a really good follow-up, too, for A.T. Perry. And we saw a lot of healthy players or players coming back. So we see the team getting a little bit healthier. Guys like Rashid Shaheed, Bub Means, Equinemius St. Brown, Paulson Adebo, and others all kind of making their reappearance in yesterday's practice. So I thought that was good news for them, too.
Last thing for you. I know the joint practices with the Niners are canceled. How big of a deal is that?
It can be a pretty big deal in two specific occasions. I think the two things that you're really watching here is the first one comes down to, you don't now get an opportunity for your starters to get more reps against unfamiliar opponents. So does that mean that you end up playing your starters a little bit more throughout this preseason? That's one thing that the Saints will have to juggle. The other thing is that you now, if you're going to keep playing that kind of milk-flavored offense we were talking about earlier throughout the preseason, you now have no opportunity to play your new offensive scheme against an unfamiliar opponent before toe meets leather week 1 against the Carolina Panthers. That's another thing that they have to consider. Do they now show a little bit more of that scheme in these preseason games so that they actually get that work against opponents? Those are going to be the two big things that I think you're going to see them at least have to consider. Doesn't mean that they'll make any changes in terms of how they were already planning to run the preseason, but I imagine those would be the considerations.
Organic milk, almond milk, whole milk?
This was straight 2%. Straight skim.
Skim milk. Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola. Follow him, subscribe to Locked On Saints, and you'll read his stuff at LouisianaSports.net. Coming up later this week. We appreciate it, man. Thanks. Enjoy the beach.
Thanks, man. Absolutely. Take care. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.